Book 1, Chapter 4, On the Education of an Orator, by Quintilian, translated by H. E. Butler. This recording is in the public domain. As soon as the boy has learned to read and write without difficulty, it is the turn for the teacher of literature. My words apply equally to Greek and Latin masters, though I prefer that a start should be made with a Greek. In either case, the method is the same. This profession may be most briefly considered under two heads: the art of speaking correctly and the interpretation of the poets. But there is more beneath the surface than meets the eye. For the art of writing is combined with that of speaking, and correct reading precedes interpretation, while in each of these cases criticism has its work to perform. The old school of teachers indeed carried their criticism so far that they were not content with obelizing lines or rejecting books whose titles they regarded as spurious, as though they were expelling a supposititious child from the family circle, but also drew up a canon of authors from which some were omitted altogether. Nor is it sufficient to have read the poets only. Every kind of writer must be carefully studied, not merely for the subject matter, but for the vocabulary, for words often acquire authority from their use by a particular author. Nor can such training be regarded as complete if it stops short of music, for the teacher of literature has to speak of meter and rhythm. Nor again, if he be ignorant of astronomy, can he understand the poets, for they, to mention no further points, frequently give their indications of time by reference to the rising and setting of the stars. Ignorance of philosophy is an equal drawback, since there are numerous passages in almost every poem based on the intricate questions of natural philosophy, while among the Greeks we have Empedocles, and among our own poets Varro and Lucretius, all of whom have expounded their philosophies in verse. No small powers of eloquence also are required to enable the teacher to speak appropriately and fluently on the various points which have just been mentioned. For this reason, those who criticize the art of teaching literature as trivial and lacking in substance put themselves out of court. Unless the foundations of oratory are well and truly laid by the teaching of literature, the superstructure will collapse. The study of literature is a necessity for boys and the delight of old age, the sweet companion of our privacy, and the sole branch of study which has more solid substance than display. The elementary stages of the teaching of literature must not, therefore, be despised as trivial. It is, of course, an easy task to point out the difference between vowels and consonants, and to subdivide the latter into semi-vowels and mutes. But as the pupil gradually approaches the inner shrine of the sacred place, he will come to realize the intricacy of the subject, an intricacy calculated not merely to sharpen the wits of a boy, but to exercise even the most profound knowledge and erudition. It is not every ear that can appreciate the correct sound of the different letters. It is fully as hard as to distinguish the different notes in music. But all teachers of literature will condescend to such minutiae. They will discuss, for instance, whether certain necessary letters are absent from the alphabet, not indeed when we are writing Greek words, for then we borrow 2 letters from them, but in the case of genuine Latin words. For example, in words such as servus and vulgus, we feel the lack of the aeolic digamma. There is also a sound intermediate between u and I, for we do not pronounce optimum as we do opimum, while in here the sound is neither exactly e nor I. Again, there is a question whether certain letters are not superfluous, not to mention the mark of the aspirate, to which, if it is required at all, there should be a corresponding symbol to indicate the opposite. For instance, ca, which is also used as an abbreviation for certain nouns, and cu, which, though slanted slightly more by us, resembles both in sound and shape the Greek κόπα, now used by the Greeks solely as a numerical sign. There is also x, the last letter of our alphabet, which we could dispense with as easily as with ψ. Again, the teacher of literature will have to determine whether certain vowels have not been consonantalized. For instance, iam and etiam are both spelt with an I, vos and tuos both with u. Vowels, however, when joined as vowels, either make one long vowel, compare the obsolete method of indicating a long vowel by doubling it as the equivalent of the circumflex, or a diphthong, though some hold that even three vowels can form a single syllable. This, however, is only possible if one or more assume the role of consonants. He will also inquire why it is that there are two vowels which may be repeated, while a consonant can only be followed and modified by a different consonant. What I can follow I, for κονίκητ is derived from iacit. So too does u, witness the modern spelling of servus and vulgus. He should also know that Cicero preferred to write aio and maiam with a double I. In that case, one of them is consonantalized. A boy must therefore learn both the peculiarities and the common characteristics of letters, and must know how they are related to each other. Nor must he be surprised that scabilum is formed from scamnus, or that a double-edged axe should be called bipenis from pinus, sharp. For I would not have him fall into the same error as those who, supposing this word to be derived from bis and pennae, think that it is a metaphor for the wings of birds. He must not be content with knowing only those changes introduced by conjugation and prefixes, such as secat, sequit, cadit, excidit, calcat, exculcat, to which might be added lotus from lavare, and again in lotus, with 1,000 others. He must learn as well the changes that time has brought about, even in nominatives. For just as names like Valesius and Fusius have become Valerius and Furius, so Arbos, Labos, Vapos, and even Clamos and Laces were the original forms. And this same letter S, which has disappeared from these words, has itself, in some cases, taken the place of another letter. Or our ancestors used to say mertare and pultare. They also said fordeum and faidi, using F instead of the aspirate, as being a kindred letter. For the Greeks, unlike us, aspirate F, like their own P, as Cicero bears witness in the Profundanio, where he laughs at a witness who is unable to pronounce the first letter of that name. In some cases, again, we have substituted B for other letters, as with burrus, bruges, and belena. The same letter, too, has turned duellum into bellum, and as a result some have ventured to call the duelli belli. What of stlocus and stlites? What of the connection between te and de, a connection which makes it less surprising that on some of the older buildings of Rome and certain famous temples we should find the names Alexanter and Cassantra? What again of the interchange of o and u, of which examples may be found in Hecoba, Notrix, Culcides, and Pulixena? Or, to take purely Latin words, dederont and probaverunt. So too Odysseus, which the Aeolian dialect turned into Ulysseus, has been transformed by us into Ulixes. Similarly, E in certain cases held the place that is now occupied by I, as in Minerva, Leber, Magester, and Dioe Victore, in place of Dioi Victori. It is sufficient for me to give a mere indication as regards these points, for I am not teaching, but merely advising those who have got to teach. The next subject to which attention must be given is that of syllables, of which I will speak briefly when I come to deal with orthography. Following this, the teacher concerned will note the number and nature of the parts of speech, although there is some dispute as to their number. Earlier writers, among them Aristotle himself and Theodectes, hold that there are but three: verbs, nouns, and conjunctions. Their view was that the force of language resided in the verbs, and the matter in the nouns, for the one is what we speak, the other that which we speak about, while the duty of the conjunctions was to provide the link between the nouns and the verbs. I know that conjunction is the term in general use, but conjunction seems to me to be the more accurate translation of the Greek syndesmos. Gradually the number was increased by the philosophers, more especially by the Stoics. Articles were first added to the conjunctions, then prepositions. To nouns appellations were added, then the pronoun, and finally the participle, which holds a middle position between the verb and the noun. To the verb itself was added the adverb. Our own language dispenses with the articles, which are therefore distributed among the other parts of speech. But interjections must be added to those already mentioned. Others, however, follow good authority in asserting that there are 8 parts of speech. Among these I may mention Aristarchus, and in our own day Palemon, who classified the vocable or appellation as a species of the genus noun. Those, on the other hand, who distinguish between the noun and the vocable make 9 parts of speech. But yet again there are some who differentiate between the vocable and the appellation, saying that the vocable indicates concrete objects which can be seen and touched, such as a house or bed, while an appellation is something imperceptible either to sight or touch or to both, such as the wind, heaven, or virtue. They added also the asseveration, such as alas, and the derivative, such as fasciatim. But of these classifications I do not approve. Whether we should translate prosegoria by vocable or appellation, and whether it should be regarded as a species of noun, I leave to the decision of such as desire to express their opinion. It is a matter of no importance. Boys should begin by learning to decline nouns and conjugate verbs, otherwise they will never be able to understand the next subject of study. This admonition would be superfluous but for the fact that most teachers, misled by a desire to show rapid progress, begin with what should really come at the end. Their passion for displaying their pupils' talents in connection with the more imposing aspects of their work serves but to delay progress, and their short cut to knowledge merely lengthens the journey. And yet a teacher who has acquired sufficient knowledge himself, and is ready to teach what he has learned, and such readiness is all too rare, will not be content with stating that nouns have 3 genders, or with mentioning those which are common to 2 or all 3 together. Nor again shall I be in a hurry to regard it as a proof of real diligence if he points out that there are irregular nouns of the kind called epicene by the Greeks, in which one gender implies both, or which in spite of being feminine or neuter in form indicates males or females respectively, as for instance muraina and glucerium. A really keen and intelligent teacher will inquire into the original of names derived from physical characteristics, such as Rufus or Longus, whenever their meaning is obscure, as in the case of Sulla, Burrus, Galba, Plautus, Pansa, Scaurus, and the like; of names derived from accidents of birth, such as Agrippa, Opiter, Cordus, and Postumus; and again of names given after birth, such as Vopiscus. Then there are names such as Cotta, Scipio, Linas, or Serranus, which originated in various ways. It will also be found that names are frequently derived from races, places, and many other causes. Further, there are obsolete slave names, such as Marcipor or Publipor, derived from the names of their owners. The teacher must also inquire whether there is not room for a sixth case in Greek and a seventh in Latin. For when I say wounded by a spear, the case is not a true ablative in Latin, nor a true dative in Greek. Again, if we turn to verbs, who is so ill educated as not to be familiar with their various kinds and qualities, their different persons and numbers? Such subjects belong to the elementary school and the rudiments of knowledge. Some, however, will find points undetermined by inflection somewhat perplexing. For there are certain participles about which there may be doubts as to whether they are really nouns or verbs, since their meaning varies with their use, as for example lectum and sapiens, while there are other verbs which resemble nouns, such as fraudator and nutritor. Again, itur in antiquam silvam is a peculiar usage, for there is no subject to serve as a starting point. Fletur is a similar example. The passive may be used in different ways, as for instance in panditur interea domus omnipotentis Olympi, and in totis usque adeo turbatur agris. Yet a third usage is found in urbs habitatur, whence we get phrases such as campus scurritur and mare navigatur. Pransus and potus have a meaning which does not correspond to their form. And what of those verbs which are only partially conjugated? Some, as for instance fero, even suffer an entire change in the perfect. Others are used only in the third person, such as licet and piget, while some resemble nouns tending to acquire an adverbial meaning, for we say dictu and factu, as we say noctu and diu, since these words are participial, though quite different from dicto and facto. End of Book 1, Chapter 4.